All right, hello, welcome back, baseliners, to the July 2023 General Assembly.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in for our monthly updates. We've had some progress within our work groups, but we'll call it summertime progress because everyone is enjoying time with their families and the usual summertime activities. So things are going the expected speed, and we expect that to also continue through August with lots of trips coming up for people and vacations across different companies and whatnot. So we'll just roll with that as usual, and then hope to get a chunk of stuff done through the fall and pre-holiday season. So bear with us as we keep moving forward on the open source community effort, which many community members, actually most, do so pretty much voluntarily, or we're lucky that several companies allocate teammates time to contribute to the efforts to get the standards work moving, which is also a slow but steady race. So keep that in mind with some of our next updates and future GAs and shows that there's a lot of work group work going on in those meetings that happen weekly. But in the grand scheme with monthly updates, they seem a little less grand when you're explaining them, but there's a lot of heavy lifting that goes into it. So with that, I'll start with some outreach updates. Mark Haddle was unable to join today, but the outreach team has been kind of chugging along, mainly focused on paying attention to the events going on for the rest of the year and which companies and community members are attending and what type of baseline presence is appropriate for the type of participation that we're having at those events or the focus and whatnot. So really just looking at the events coming up this year, we will keep the community updated if we have any major baseline presence planned. I know one of the larger ones would be All Things Open. Still figuring out who's going to Dev Connect in the community in November. So we'll keep everyone updated. And really a lot of the other outreach efforts are just going to be following alongside some of the development work to make sure that we have things packaged up from the business and functional point of view. So we'll be using outreach members' help as well as some of our core devs who have the skill of explaining things in a functional way to business people to get that work packaged up in blogs and short videos and things that are understandable to non-developers. And then as usual, all of the outreach efforts that have been done in the past were hopefully done so in a way where they're evergreen and can be picked up for anyone looking at conducting their own research or outlining how baseline can be used for a specific use case, or even as high level as identifying industries that baseline can be applied to. So if anyone is interested in any of the outreach adjacent activities with the baseline protocol, please let us know, because there is lots of content in the drive that can be used. We also have one blog coming up next week from the TSC, which may be mentioned again in the later update, but Maron from SAP, who's on the technical steering committee, published a piece that is currently called Global Supply Chain Coordination via Baseline Protocol and Consensus Controlled State Machine. So it dives into the problems that companies face synchronizing systems of records or the lack of synchronization. It explains consensus controlled state machines and how that is heavily leveraged in the baseline protocol. And many of the requirements are around the CCSM and how that enables organizations and counterparties that aren't even at the same company to synchronize workflows and have a shared state. And he explains some of the work that went on in BLIP 1/BLIP 14, which are baseline improvement proposals. And there was an effort that shifted into a another effort as well of blip one, which was identifying where ZK and a CCSM can be used for a global supply chain use case. Several deliverables came out of that are patterns and diagrams that can be applied to various use cases as well. So his blog is a really great wrap up of those efforts that were done by many, many participants from different companies. So keep an eye out for that one. And with that, Yoav, I will hand over to you for some core dev updates.
I am muted. Alrighty, thank you, Sam. Cool. So in the last 3 or 4 weeks or so, as far as the core devs go, the main focus has been BRI3 or SRI, the simple reference implementation, especially in the kind of open source work groups, with a major kind of emphasis on this work group, working on creating the SRI in a way that will be easily compatible for the interop, working the interop work group stuff that's been going on. So the interop showcase that we'll be having at some time, I believe this year, is the current roadmap for that. I'm going to share my screen and we can kind of look over some things that have been done to the repo. So let me pull up that. Okay. So as far as the SRI goes, we are currently in milestone 4, sort of trying to wrap up this milestone. It has been one of the bigger of the milestones, which has been taking up quite a bit of development time and man hours, but to sort of get a better understanding of where this milestone is at and what is left, a GitHub milestone has been created inside the repo, and all of the issues pertaining to this milestone and what's left to be completed for this milestone have been created and tagged within this MIL4 milestone in the GitHub repo. So this is to gauge sort of what's left to do in order to wrap up this milestone completely. And I think I've created a drinking game here for the amount of times I can say the word milestone. So there's a handful of issues here, I think 6 with this needs work tag. So these means it's sort of a shell issue. It's just giving a broad overview of something that will need to be completed so that someone in the work group can grab it, pick it up, add details to it, and then put it in their name and get to work on it. Outside of those 6, there are, I believe, another 6 that are in somebody's name, have been sort of more sufficiently filled out, and then have had work done to them, whether it's within another document or within a branch, excuse me, within the repo. But all these will have an overview of what's kind of to be accomplished, which is just the longer version of its title, right? And then references, questions if there are any, and then some acceptance criteria and the tasks involved to complete that acceptance criteria. So it's all pretty standard, but will give us and the community as at large a better idea of what's being done and what's left to be done, and will just help overall with tracking status and things like that. So that's where this is at. There are several other issues being opened in the repo that are interop related, and I think we'll get into that a little later in the in this GA. But a lot of this is coming from adding documentation of some kind or understanding to this interop space within the repo, which now exists, I believe, in examples. Yes, examples BPI interop. Here we go. So within this file structure, which has been pushed, I think, since the last GA or so, there are schemas that have been added, as well as some workflow diagram and a nice README here to kind of give an understanding of what this work group is working on, times that they meet in case anyone would like to sit in or join on the efforts, and then give an idea of the current use case in progress. Okay, so there are a couple PRs open in the repo. One is by Ryan here on the call, which is interop related.
Yeah.
It is an example for BRI messaging, pertaining again to that interop sort of space that we were just looking at. And another will be this transaction execution infrastructure, and this is SRI related. As far as the milestone 4 issue that this is being linked to is just completing this sort of transaction execution layout here that's been outlined within this issue 686 here. And just to kind of show sort of the workflow of how these things work. So there's the issue, right? It has, in this case, its overview, like we said, a reference with its documentation here. In this case, it's a reference to the actual spec itself, to kind of show what it'll be directly correlating to within the standard, and then the acceptance criterias that are required to be implemented in order to call this complete. And then once all those things are done, it can then be linked here in this related issue section of this PR with the rest of the PR template to show that it's a, you know, it's a new feature. It's been tested with unit tests, more to follow, and then follows the style and everything like that. So it's all very kind of to keep things clean and to be able to easily just grab the repo and follow along with anything that's been changed. I think as far as core devs, SRI, and the repo are concerned, that's kind of the major updates. Things have been completely organized in terms of what's left to do for this milestone for the SRI, and the group is working pretty diligently to close it all out. There was 20 or so when it was built out, and now we're down to 12. So things are sort of moving as fast as you can hope, I would say, for open source work. Everybody has their own responsibilities outside of this, but are still finding a very respectable amount of time to contribute here. So I think it's, I think things are still moving along. I think we're feeling pretty good. We're excited to get milestone 5 rolling as well. Keith, do you have anything to mention there as far as the work group is?
No, that's good. Yeah.
So maybe because the next section is interop, we can have Ryan, if you want to just talk about what this PR is. We
Yeah,
can kind of go over
absolutely.
more about interop.
Yeah, and I'll share my screen here, and because the
Perfect, yeah.
README I put out here is also, you know, pretty extensive in terms of what's provided here. So starting up from the top here, yes, there's some source code in here for, you know, creating the protocol message, but also this README walks you like from beginning to end, you know, setup of the account, setup of the organization, work group, all of that, that's as the prerequisite. And once everything is configured, right, all through BRI1, in terms of what's there, like how do you get this back into a form you can use, right, to trigger the protocol message yourself, right? So there's a Postman collection there, and that's where I recommend folks to start off with if you want to work through this yourself, is go from the Postman, and you follow these execution steps, get your access tokens in order, right? And from there you can trigger the protocol message like right from Postman, right? And get your ZK proof back, and check out where the workflow is, and then move those credentials right into Node.js, right? And the Node.js is explained here in terms of what env file you need to maintain, and even as far as, and this isn't as like pictured, but this is included, right? To say like, hey, if you want to do it in SAP, which is where I originally built this out, there's that too, right? Now, so you can at least get a look at it. And cool thing to know about this use case is where does this data come from out of SAP? Well, there's this table called LFBK, right? That holds the vendor bank records, right? And now, if there's a change request, it may come from a different place. But if you look online for the LFBK table, that's where you'd find this data, right, for this given use case. So, and this is a very simple protocol messaging message, from the SAP side in terms of how that works. But there you go. There's a lot to unpack there. I think most folks, though, when you're looking at this, you would most likely just do the Node.js call, and then just do node create protocol message, and it would run this code. So check it out. I hope you guys do that and enjoy it. And yeah, it's kind of a gateway into other things, BRI1. But this is what this is about, is like bringing these two BRIs together, right, into a single use case to show that, like, hey, when we do proof verification across the different BPIs, it works, right? So
Awesome. Thanks for walking us through that. And I hate to put you on the spot, but since you are an active work group member for the interop group, could you give a general update as well, just on what's going on in that group and the status of the overall effort?
Yeah, so with interop in general, right, what we're working towards is more of this kind of hands-on work of emitting the protocol messages, and also really well understanding like what's under the hood, right, in terms of getting into the DID and key agreements. So there's still some requirements analysis work going on, but I think we are just getting far enough now with both BRI1 and I think this can be said of BRI3, where there's more traffic coming through, right? Just getting the identity pieces aligned. I think getting the identity part is a key task ahead of us right now, in terms of making sure the credentials work across different BPIs. So but luckily for us, Andreas's insight on DIDs is extremely valuable for all of us there. So that's more of what's going on in interop there.
Great, thank you. All righty. I will take the technical steering committee update. So I mentioned we have our next blog coming out. I think it was a great addition to the TSC responsibilities to require each member to publish a blog once in the year. It brings some really great thought leadership and content behind Baseline, and ensures that we are continuously bringing content forward for the external community, because even if things aren't glamorous and exciting all the time, they still are moving and progressing. And the Baseline protocol is becoming more usable than ever before now. So really excited that we're able to pump out those blogs. And Andreas did just hop on, so I'll wrap up another TSC update, and then I'll hand up over to him to finish up. So the TSC as mentioned, it's summertime, so a few meetings didn't have quorum, as you can expect. But the main items going on are around the fundraising needed for the roadmap items. So we have community members, TSC members chatting with different organizations to find the best way to fund the work. We're seeing if there's a potential to have a Gitcoin grant round. And we're also reaching out to different companies in our networks to see if there are others with interest in the in-kind contribution buckets to have devs that are on the bench or other technical and non-technical resources to contribute to the efforts, because that is another very viable path forward to keep progressing on our roadmap. Is similar to some of us who aren't always doing these efforts for grant work, but to contribute time and thought behind these efforts that are needed for the roadmap this year. Andreas, we'll hand over to you to wrap any TSC updates. I just covered the blog and what you just heard.
All right.
And then you can shift into standards as well. And we completed interop.
Oh, okay, great. So then there's really not much from a TSC point of view. I think that the most viable near-term opportunity for raising grant money is through the Gitcoin grant process for Ethereum infrastructure. So we'll and that kicks off in like 3 weeks. So we'll need to get familiar with that and prepare a grant request. That's a quadratic funding round. So other than that, continuing the conversation with Oasis to see if they can help us with making connections to companies. That unfortunately has been delayed because of personal health issues on the Oasis side. So that is unfortunate, but hopefully we'll be able to resume that even over the slow month of August, such that we are set up for September, because we're getting close towards the end where we need to see whether we need to like kick things down the road if we cannot get grant funding up and going. Other than that, there's not much also from the PGB that is relevant for the baseline community. So let me then, if there are no more questions on the TSC, I can just quickly flip over. If someone has one, please post them on online. We'll answer them after the standards update. So from standards point of view, actually we have 5 open PRs that still need to be reviewed. The editors have been, had other priorities that they needed to worry about. So I've not progressed around writing more testability statements. We'll have to hopefully get some time in the fall to wrap that up. It has definitely taken longer than hoped for, but as I find time, I will continue to add to that. Hopefully, somehow we'll get it done by the end of the year and everything merged. But other priorities have taken hold here. Other than that, there's not much from the standards track. Would be great if people want to pitch in. The PRs are open. Review them if you want to grab a section or subsection in the standard and add testability statements. And in the spirit of what's in the PRs, please feel free. We're always happy and if people want to contribute. So that's on that front. So back to you, Sonal.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So that wraps our official updates from the different work groups. Now I'll open up for a open floor. Is there anything any of our studio members here want to give updates on or chat about that they've been learning about in the tech news recently, feel free.
Yeah, so I just want to give a quick update on what's happening in the telco space, because I was in at the MEF forum last week, and per invitation, and looking at the various showcase projects that the MEF forum, which has 120 plus telco members, like AT&T, Verizon, Orange, Deutsche Telekom, China Telecom, Sparkle, Telecom Italia, you name it, Vodafone. The thrust there is really around multi-party business automation. So there is one particular project that is around wholesale billing, and the two involved companies, AT&T and Verizon, are actually basically going to or looking to implement a baseline pattern for reconciliation. Don't go into what they're actually using on the client side, which is it's large company stuff, which is you know, slightly problematic, because they're basically synchronizing two blockchains, basically a bridge with a ZK EVM as the relayer in a way. The other interesting thing is that from that is that the concept of DAOs for enterprises, or you know, really automated digital cooperatives, is gaining more and more traction, and they are around, again, business process automation. Also, again, using under zero knowledge. So it's a different type of baseline pattern implementation, which is interesting. The way that it's starting to emerge. So you know, luckily the standard captures those that pattern too. The upshot is that you know, we can there are now different ways how to effectively implement the baseline pattern also with other technology stacks, which is really nice to see, and that concept is gaining more and more traction on the enterprise side. They're not quite there yet. They're still you know, wrapping their heads around it, but they know that they need to collaborate together in order to be able to achieve what they need to do in terms of business growth, or addressing really gnarly business problems such as address validation.
Yeah, great updates. I'm so curious what's behind the enterprise architecture, because it's like I'm always the architecture guy. I love figuring out what kind of obscure systems that companies are running that need to get on baselining and ZK, right? There's always so many weird things out there. More mainframes than you realize out in the world that are still running critical business processes, but don't have, you know, good synchronization to the people that really need it up or downstream.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those updates. And any further conversations before we wrap?
Nothing for me. All right, I think we're good to close it up then, yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and of
Good.
course, thanks for joining and sharing updates. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank you,
care.
everyone.